Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kid and Clouder Colouring Classes, and I have a special surprise for you today. I'm gifting you all Chapter 1 of my new Jars of Beauty classes, my May to June colouring projects, absolutely free. We'll be learning how to create these simple backgrounds behind absolutely any image at all to enhance your colouring. So go and grab your favourite image and let's add these backgrounds in. These videos are taken directly from the class, so you can see how they run, and you'll notice some art fundamentals and art therapy chat at the start of the video. While it can be tempting to skip the talking and jump to the good stuff, I encourage you to please watch the whole video to help set up your class experience and get the most out of your learning. Want to colour the rest of the image with me? You can find the full class, which is suitable for beginners, over at kidandclouder.com. It comes with a full video tutorial and step-by-step booklet, free private tutoring, and lifetime access to do at your own pace. Hope to colour with you this month and enjoy Chapter 1. Hi everyone, it's Elise from Kid and Clouder Colouring Classes, and welcome to our May 2022 colouring class for markers. In this month's class, we're going to be colouring up this scene from Power Poppy, and we're going to be looking at colouring our plumeria or frangipani flowers. We've got some leaves, we've got our glass bottle with the liquid inside, we've got our seashells as well, we've got a wooden frame, backgrounds. We're going over so many techniques in this class today that you can take away and apply to all different images afterwards. The whole point of our classes here is to help you grow your colouring skills, to teach you all different techniques that when you go to colour your favourite images after class, you can draw on what you've learned and those real art fundamentals that we'll be going through to help enhance your colouring. Part of learning to colour is trying all different styles, techniques, topics, and images. We don't want to always be sticking to our favourite things, as then we don't learn to challenge ourselves and go out of our comfort zone to really level up and improve. Even if you have no intention of colouring a particular topic, learning about the fundamentals behind it will help you with your own favourite topics afterwards still. So that's why it's really important to go outside of what's comfortable, what you usually colour and what you think you'd go for. I always hear from our students that when they push to try something new, even if it's not their usual favourite, those lessons are actually their favourites and when they feel like they've grown the most. So why not challenge yourself next time to try something a little different as well? Now we're going to be going through some real art fundamentals and breaking everything down to beginner basics. So if you're new to colouring, this is going to be a great lesson for you to start learning how to create depth and dimension in your projects. And even if you've been colouring for a while, this is going to be a great lesson to explain some of the more intricate detailing and theories for you to level up. Every person is going to have something different that they'll take away from this lesson based on their experience. Remember, the whole point of doing your class is just to learn, so I want you to focus on learning one new thing or taking away one skill and refining it that you already have here today. That's going to keep you leveling up, but it means that our focus is not on getting everything absolutely perfect, because we won't. When we try new things, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have areas that we want to improve upon, but they're wonderful. They're your areas of growth, and they are your real lessons. So don't ever feel down on yourself if you don't quite get something today. Keep going with it, see how the project comes together at the end, and think about what you could adjust differently for next time to improve upon those results. If you always bring your focus back to the lesson rather if something is right or wrong, it's so much more confidence boosting and motivating to keep going. Our classes always come with free one-on-one private tutoring, so you can get full help on leveling up and on tweaking anything you may be unhappy with. Please don't ever hesitate in sending your images through for the free private tutoring. It's always the people who do this who level up the most and really grow. The people who put aside their colouring and think, oh, that was hard, or I didn't get that today, or maybe I'll come back to it in a few weeks. I see these people eventually drop out because they lose confidence and they feel like they're doing something wrong when a quick 2-minute chat could have helped them with what they could adapt and adjust to feel better with continuing on. So don't ever feel embarrassed, nervous, or a burden to reach out. It's absolutely my pleasure to help you feel confident to keep going with your colouring journey. Alright, let's get ready to go and jump in. Now before we do jump in, I need to go over some theory with you. And please do watch this. I know theory can sound a little boring because you're just listening to me chat, but it's the way that you really improve. Because we don't want to just copy, we want to learn and understand why we're doing what we're doing. Now the most important thing with coloring is called light source. Now light source helps to create depth and dimension in our projects. A light source is anything in our scenes that creates light. Without light, we cannot see, and objects don't look realistic or have any dimension to them. So we really need to think about not only how to illuminate our scene, but also how the shadows help to create form. Now, we usually use ambient lighting in our classes. Ambient lighting is considered the most flattering form of light. And what this is it's big sources of light in the scene, like the sun or overhead lights in our ceiling. And they cast big cones of light that come down over the entire image, rather than coming from, say, one side. So you'll end up with both sides of your image will be illuminated in parts, and both sides will be shadowed in parts. The way that we approach this is any part of our image or the objects that's popping up toward us, our light rays come down and hit those raised up areas first, and these will appear the lightest and brightest. And we call these our highlights. Now the opposite of that are parts of the image that are curving away or slanting down and away from those light rays. These are further from the light and so are darker, and we call these our shadows. Now between the highlight and shadow we have what's called the midtone of the object. And midtone is generally considered the true color as it's not affected by light or shade. Now one more theory that's really important is the cast shadow. Now can you see the shadow that's on my hand? I'm holding my frozen pencil over my hand here, and the shadow that's on my hand is cast by that pencil above. Whenever we have something in front or above something else, it casts a shadow onto that object below or behind. The closer these objects are together, the darker and harder that shadow is. And then as I lift them up in a way, the softer and more dispersed that shadow becomes. And notice as well as the gap between my object and the shadow. So what is this doing? This is showing the definition and the levels between multiple objects that are touching or close together in our scenes. It's really important because that's what makes these individual elements stand out. So you can really start to see that three-dimensionality with your coloring. This is the thing that I see people leave out the most, especially when it comes to coloring away from class. And that's normal because we don't just know to do this. We have to learn about it. But now that you know and understand, every time you color, you get a chance to employ these art fundamentals that we're chatting about. Don't worry if it feels overwhelming at first. That's absolutely normal. Whenever we learn new things, it's a lot of information to take in. But now that you know the start of this video goes through that, you can put the start of the video on anytime at all. So if you're going to go and color up your own image after class, just throw this part of the image on. It only takes a minute or two, and you can go over this light source theory again. Remind yourself of the little steps that we take and how you can implement them in your projects. This is also a good tip to do with your main class as well. So say we're doing florals and shells here today. So you have another image that has shells in it and you think, oh, we did that back in a class, say last year. Grab your class out and put on that section of the tutorial again. Even if the image is different, all of the techniques that we're going to go through are still the same. So you can apply what you're learning into other images as well. And putting the video on or grabbing out your booklet reminds you of those steps that we take rather than you relying on memory. And that's when we start to forget the little bits. Repetition is really how we learn new skills. So we have to go over the technique a few times before it sinks in and before we apply it to our own images. So I bring that up because I do get a few people say when they leave class, they don't know what to do again. They do well in class, but when it comes to their image, they feel a bit stuck and they're like, how do I tackle this? Or I'm not growing and learning with my own images. And that's because you're not reminding yourself of the steps you take. It's not second nature yet, and that's normal. Think about any time you've started a new job or you've tried to learn a new skill. The first time you do something, it kind of goes in and out. You can do it and you can do a good job, but it's not part of your vocabulary yet. It's not easy. It's not second nature. You have to do something a few times with instructions in order for you to really understand and remember and reuse those techniques. So you're never a failure if you get after class and you kind of don't remember what to do and you have to put on the video again. That's going to actually be how you're going to grow the most with your coloring. So use your classes. They're there to help. And like I even just said, you can even use your class with other images too. So if you're a design team member or you like to make birthday cards and this image isn't quite right for you today, grab out an image that's similar. It might just have the seashells. You might just focus on the background and creating this frame and border technique. You might have leaves and flowers. You can use parts of your class on other images and still be really getting the most benefit from it. Okay, so I think enough chatting from me. We're going to go ahead and jump on in. I'm going to start you with the background here today. Backgrounds are often things that people find quite scary, and it's not because they're hard, but it's because we don't yet have practice in it. This is a really, really simple way to create a background. So my image doesn't actually have a frame around it at all. It's just the image in the center. I wanted to do a background, but I didn't want to use up like the whole page. So I tried to think about how I could condense this down. So what I did was I first drew a rectangle around the image. And you can do this on Microsoft Word or you can do it by hand with a lead pencil. Drawing a background around an image is a great way to constrain a background, make it a little smaller so you don't have to fill in an entire page. If you have die cuts, you could even place like a scallop die in the middle and like trace around that. It doesn't have to be a rectangle and it doesn't have to go around the entire image. You'll notice here what I've done is I've just made just a central rectangle and I've allowed my image to come over the edges at the top and bottom. That makes my background area a little smaller, makes it a little bit easier to manage. And I like this idea of the image sort of exploding out from that background. So you can always just do a basic rectangle and fill it in with whatever background you like. You could do a sunset sky, you could just do a texture, you could just do a color. It's endless opportunity. But what I've done here is I created two rectangles and I've drawn a frame. So really simple to do, and you can do this behind any image, your character stands, your animals, but you can start to create interesting details and features yourself without it being drawn in. This is really simple and I'm going to show you how to create that frame effect. Now to make it easy for you today, I've actually drawn in the two rectangles very lightly. You'll find that image in your class folder as well when you grab it from PowerPoppy. I just did this on Microsoft Word. So I just did two very light rectangles so I had my frame edge there. If you are using another image and you're not comfortable on the computer, you can always draw it in with a pencil as I said before. Or if you do want help with how to do this, you can feel free to ask anytime. I do even have a video tutorial on my YouTube channel. You'll want the advanced techniques for digital stamps tutorial. Once I've drawn my two rectangles, I'm going to grab a lead pencil and I'm going to draw a line between the corners. This is creating a mitered edge. It's when we have two sides that are cut on the angle and they meet in like that. So typically on photo frames, you'll see a mitered edge. And you can see I've done it on the other side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw two circles, and these are going to be my little fixtures, my little nails here. Try and make them all roughly the same size, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, now once we've done that, we can go ahead and start to add a little color. I'm going to grab C5, and what I'm going to do here is apply C5 around these little circles. I'm going to try and make it a little bit thicker at the bottom because that is the side that's furthest from the light, with our light coming from above. And we can do the same on the other side as well. And now I've got a little bit of C3, and I'm just popping in, blending in toward the center. Now if you can, try and leave a little bit of white. This will help increase the contrast between the colors and will help these little metal parts look shiny. So we create shiny effects by having contrast with deep dark shadows versus bright white highlights. If you don't quite get there today, it's absolutely okay. Just color over the whole circle. You can even come back in with a white gel or paint pen. I use a Uniball Signo pen, and you can even just do a little dot through the center areas here and your highlights will come up brighter again. Now once you've done that, we can go ahead and add some coloring to the frame. So we're going to create a timber effect, and I'm going to use my E70s for this. So I'm going to start with a little bit of E79. I'm going to pop in and I'm just going to trace along that mitered edge. From here, I'm also going to do a nice thick cast shadow straight under these little screws or nails. And I'm just going to extend a little bit down the page. Now this side here is going to be darker than our top face, and I'm going to make sure to extend down this darker color from this top edge. As I get to where my objects are overlapping the frame, I want to create a cast shadow underneath them. So remember, a cast shadow is when something is in front or above something else. Shows the distance between the levels. So I just pop in and do a nice thick cast shadow behind that little leaf. Really help it to look like it's standing out on the page. And I'm extending down. I'm just going to come around where my shell is on top, and I'm just tracing around this as well, and then I'll extend my shading up from this point. And I'm going to come back in the opposite direction as well and just extend that shading down to the bottom. So we're doing one side at a time here. And again, extend your shading out after you've created it. Alright, once you've done that, we can start to blend out. So my next color is E77. I'm going straight over the top of what I've just done and extending further down the page. Try and make sure the edges are fairly straight. It's okay if it's not 100% straight. You don't need to grab out a ruler or anything, because also a little bit of imperfection works really nice when we color timber. Because it's not perfect, we have that rustic sort of beachy look. And you can see I'm just extending this a little further out, so we're slowly covering the frame. My next color is a little bit of E74. And again, we're extending a little further out. You can see I'm focusing a little bit more on the edges of the frame as well. And my next color is E71. And now as I apply the slider color, I'm not going to do like a perfect coverage. I'm just sort of coming through, and you can see long sort of strokes through here. It's a little messy. It allows me to come in with my E70, and we get a little texture from that as well. So going for that rustic sort of look. Now once you've done that, we can create like a bit of a timber pattern. So I'm just going to grab my E77, and we're just going to draw in some texture. So I start from the top, and I'm just going to do some little lines extending down. Now, usually I hold my marker really nice and soft, and I just sort of drag it through, allowing it to naturally get some bump and movement. You can curve some of the lines. You can even do like a little knot where it curves, and then it will extend out from there. When you get sort of like a triangular shape, you can come down and fill that in. So you can see I extended back to create that little triangular shape. There's not really a right or wrong way to do this. Timber's always got different movement and textures. You can do some lines where it just sort of stops, and then some lines where it's a little longer. But usually it will just sort of follow through. And hold softly and get that natural bump and movement. Then I like to grab my E74, and I just trace over what I've just done and just extend out a little so I get a little bit more blending on our texture. And it doesn't need to be perfect here. I'm being pretty rough. I'm just sort of roughly shading. And that is one side of my timber frame all done. Now let's continue along the top. Now the top I want to be a little bit lighter than the sides, just so we can get some sort of different dimension. You can see on my original here, the top being lighter, the sides being a bit darker. It just shows the focus of light a little more. So when I use my darkest colors here, I'm really going to bring the E79 like in my cast shadow areas. So I'm going to come like in and around the leaves here. So take your time and make sure that you're not shading on any leaves by accident. If you do, it's okay though. I've definitely done that before. And you can see I'm just applying beneath each of these little leaves to help them really stand out. Then we'll blend out, so E77 will be next. And we go straight over the top and we just extend out. E74. I'm really starting to pull this down those sides now. Even do a bit of a car shadow under the nails there. And our other side, do the same thing. Let's come down. E71. And then E70. Now we can go ahead and add in a little texture to grab your E77, and you can work on creating those texture lines. So hold it softly and get that natural bump sort of happening in the movement here. And you can blend out with a little of the E74 as well. Thicken everything up. Get a little bit more coverage on the page. Alright, I've got the one on the other side, so let's do the same thing. We're going to start with E79. Remember, darker at this edge, so pulling through that darkest color along the sides. Cast shadow beneath and then extend the color down. Little cast shadow under the leaves here as well. And then let's come up from the bottom. I'm going to come in and around the side here. The side is just going to be the darkest color. You're not seeing a lot of the frame. And then we have a little bit peeking through at the bottom, but not a lot. So same thing, just grab that darkest color and I'm just applying the berry shadow. Of course, when you do this technique as well, you can use any color blend to do this. It doesn't have to be this exact blend. It doesn't even need to be brown. You can really play with all different colors to create an interesting frame. And you can still do timber texture. Don't forget, timber can be painted. It doesn't always have to be browns or blondie colors. E77 is next. E74. E71. And then E70. Remember, the blend doesn't have to be perfect because we want a little of that roughness anyway. Then grab your E77 and you can draw in some of your timber texture. Hold the marker lightly and get that natural bump along the page. and then you can blend out with the E74. And that's how we create a simple timber frame. And you can do that behind any image again, super easy, quick to do. You can follow up the background with 2 coats of color. I find that when I repeat my blends, the color comes up a lot richer. So if you find it's not as strong as you'd like, absolutely repeat. Now again, inside the frame, you can really do anything you like. You can do a sunset, you can do a night sky, you can just do a color, you can play a texture. You can really get creative with what you do. I really wanted a strong, deep background here so that I could really make all of my flowers and everything pop out and really lend toward that sea theme. So I'm going to play with mixing some blues and some aqua colors here for the background. And we're going to create a simple texture. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to work on one section at a time, and I'm going to start with my B37. We're going to start this by drawing in our cast shadows. So I'm going to come in nice and close to the image, and I'm just going to apply straight underneath. Almost thinking of the bottle as like sitting in front of a wall. So rather than just sort of having a floating background, I really want to play with my cast shadows to make it look like this is popping off. So bringing this B37 in and around the leaves and details that are on the page. Now you'll notice I'm applying to the side that's facing the bottom rather than around the whole leaf. So with our lighting coming from above like this, we don't need to outline everything. It's more focused on where that shadow would fall. Going to pop in and around the rest of the bottle though. And kind of around that shell too. And up the side of the frame. Now from here, just extend your colors a little bit more once you've drawn your shadow. I like to feather the stroke, and if you're not sure what feathering is, make sure you check out our free Markers 101 class where we go through the basic strokes. Feathering is when I'm just overlapping the strokes close together and I'm just slightly flicking at the end. So you can see, you can't see individual strokes, but I'm not just ending it in a straight line. We get that gradual soft fade. My next color is BG78. Now this is an aqua, so I've completely changed color families. And I'm going straight over the top of what I've just done and then extending that a little further out. So I'm making this a really nice deep dark blend. By going over the top of that darker blue, what's happening is I'm toning it. So I'm creating like a rich blue-green color as my darkest color. So we don't always add color to get from A to B, to get from light to dark. Sometimes we add color to create color blends. So that's important to think about as well, because I often see people say, well, I need 3 colors in a blend, go from light to dark, and they don't actually think that it's not as simple as having a formula like that. You can have so much more control over what you create by mixing your colors together. My next color again is BG75, so I'm sticking with those aqua tones for now. I'm coming back over the previous, and we want to get a little texture. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing like an oval sort of stroke on top, coming all the way back over everything and extending in toward that highlight with these big ovals. They're not hollow, they're closed ovals as well, so you don't want to see like the circle so much, but it just means your blend will have a slight texture as you finish up. Now we're going to add texture over this, so don't worry about how perfect the finished result is. But my next color is B34, and I'm doing that oval sort of stroke back over everything and then coming into the highlight, the rest of the area. So what I've done here is I've mixed my blue and my aqua colors so that as I move from the shadow to the highlight, it sort of shifts between. It's like a really mottled sort of blue-green effect. Now, you can leave it there, but I actually want a little texture in my background. So what I do is I grab my Colorless Blender. Now the blender, it isn't really a blender marker as such. The blender is literally just the alcohol component of your marker, of your same normal colored Copic, but without the colored ink. So basically, if you think about how markers blend, you have a darker colored alcohol and you are placing lighter colored alcohol over the top to dilute it down a little bit. We don't come over with straight alcohol. We use the lighter colored alcohol to slowly dilute a darker alcohol. By slowly diluting it down, we don't have as big a jump between the colors, and that's what gives you those smooth blends. You're just gradually lightening up a color until you get to the lightest color that you want. So if you think of it that way, suddenly blending makes a lot more sense. You're not using these colors to go, I need to get from here to here. You're using the colors to dilute the darker one down so you can get that gradient effect. When we use like a straight alcohol over the top, what happens is it dilutes the color very fast. So you can get like a splotchy or a textured effect. So we generally don't use the blender to blend out straight colors because we wouldn't get a seamless look, but we can use it to fix mistakes because you are essentially diluting that ink right down so you don't see it as strongly, or we can use it to create resist effects. So just to show you what I mean on the side of the page, I know sometimes explaining doesn't make sense, but if I have color like this, if I grab my Colorless Blender and I go straight over the top, and you can see I'm going over and over creating a line, what I'm doing is I'm diluting the ink down and making it lighter. Can you see the line that's happening there? That's just because I've added just clear alcohol, straight alcohol over the colored alcohol. So what it's doing, it's diluting down the pigment that was in there, so it's getting lighter and lighter, and I can see that pattern that I'm creating. So that's how fixing mistakes works. You come over and over the mistake, and then you'll notice it gradually gets lighter. That's if you go outside of the edges, for example. But you can see it's not foolproof. It doesn't take you back to white because you still have pigment on the paper. So it takes a bit of playing around with to really get that. And I do go over that a lot in our Markers 101 class. So do check it out if you're new to markers and you're like, oh, that's a bit of a light bulb moment. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to layer up dabs. So I get my Colorless Blender. I want to use more the side of the marker, not the tip. And then using the side, I'm literally just coming through and I'm dabbing all over. And then as these dabs occur, it will slowly lift the ink on the page, and it's going to just give me a mottled texture. If you hold the marker down for longer in one area, that area is going to be brighter and the texture will look more strong. I just really want more of a gradual effect, so I just keep layering on top these little like circles. And gradually this texture will start to come through. And this also breaks it up if you find your blend wasn't as smooth as you'd like. The texture just sort of breaks it up a little bit. You can take your time to draw in some circles in particular areas. Remember that if you go over and over one area, the texture is going to look more prominent. Okay, we'll let that dry. We'll move on to the next section. So I'm going to come up now. We're going to start with the B37 again. And let's add in our shadows. So I'm going to come under the frame to cast shadow under the frame because the frame is sitting over the top of this backing board. We're going to come underneath our florals. Take your time when you come in between them here as well. Some of these areas are quite small. You can always use a pencil or a fine liner for the really small areas as well. You don't always have to use your markers because you're not going to really be blending in there. So if that's something you struggle with, you can absolutely cheat it a little bit. But truly, your control on small areas comes with practice. So if it's something you struggle with, that's 100% normal. We all do when we start. You just have to keep doing it. Keep doing the smaller images, allow yourself to have those little difficulties, and it will get easier. I'm coming in between the leaves over here. Okay, next color, BG78. We come over the previous. It's really important that we come over the top because we want to tone it out. We don't just want a dark blue because that's not the color that's used in the blend. It's that mottled sort of effect and that contrast between that aqua. So we come over the top and tone it out. And then we want to come over these little bits as well. BG75 is next. Now because we've already toned out those little areas, we don't need to do that again. We can just leave them with that darker aqua tone. And then B34. Then grab your blender and we'll create that mottled effect. Alright, moving on. B37. And apply as your shadow. We're just repeating the techniques through the remaining areas. And I've also just got a few little bits at the bottom. BG78. BG75. And B34. Make sure you come back over all the previous with the B34 as well. Overlapping your colors is how we can get it seamless when we work with different blends like this. We don't want to just start one color family where another ends. That can often make it look like stepped rather than seamless. And then grab that blender marker and you can give it a little dab as well. And that is actually my background all finished up. And you can see, because we focused on creating the shadows first and blending out from there, it already makes our image stand out. It's already deeper behind the image, makes the image pop, even though we don't have any color on there at the moment. But we've got that really interesting background that just creates that frame around without having to do a whole lot of work. So hopefully that was a little bit easier than you thought, and you can think of ways that you can implement this on any of your images after class. So we've already gone through light source techniques, we've gone through creating timber textures and the textured background effects as well, and how to create frames around your images. Now remember, this is your first time trying this technique, and when we try new things, we can often have mistakes in areas we don't love. It's totally normal. Before looking at your work, I want you to do something really important, and that's change your perspective. When we're coloring, we color from about 10 or 20 centimeters away. We color so up close, focusing on every single little detail, every mistake, every single little aspect. But that's not actually how coloring is viewed. Think about whenever you're online, you see someone else's work. Do you sit so close and scrutinize looking for mistakes? No, you look at the whole thing, you appreciate it in entirety, how the techniques have come together. That's what we want to do here as well. So to help you change your perspective, what I would encourage you to do is hop up out of your chair, do some hand stretches, just open and close your hands a few times, make sure you're not getting any RSI from holding those pencils, neck gently from side to side, and even do a lap walking around the room just to loosen up. Then when you come back, hold your coloring out at arm's distance or prop it up against the wall and take a few steps back. You're changing that perspective, viewing it as a whole and seeing how it's coming together. Make sure you do those things so you actually get up and do your stretches. It helps so much rather than just holding it back and looking. So when you're looking at your whole piece, remember if there's areas you don't love, instead of saying I've done this wrong or it's not perfect, really don't like when people say that. Try and always avoid it, especially if you're sharing online as well. What I want you to do instead is look at your piece and say, any areas you don't love, think of the lesson here. Next time I'm going to do this to get this result. And see, all of a sudden you change negative into positive into constructive. It's your learning opportunity, and that's exactly what we're here to do today. So experiment, have fun with it. You're doing a great job. I'm really excited to see how you're going. Pop in and share your coloring after this step with us. Pop it in our Facebook group, pop it on Instagram, your blogs, any other group. You're welcome to share any way you like. All I love is that you please just mention that you're learning at Kit and Clouder so others can come and learn with us as well. I love if you mention what class it is. But you are working hard. You are challenging yourself. You're pushing yourself. That deserves to be celebrated. So again, give yourself a big pat on the back. You've done the most important thing to help you grow your coloring here today, and that's just having a go.